Hi friends, and welcome back. In the Pennsylvania area here, coming into the holidays leading up to New Year's, a big tradition in Pennsylvania on New Year's is sauerkraut, and it's super easy to make. So coming into the holidays this year, it could be a good gift idea for family. It could be a great thing to bring to families on a New Year's Eve, or just in general to have in your refrigerator, as we have all the time here in our household. So one of the things that we need to start out with is figuring out the salt content you put in there. Basically, sauerkraut, it's just cabbage with salt. That's it. The salt pulls the moisture out of the cabbage, creates a brine, and then it just sits and ferments for weeks. The longer it sits and ferments, the softer the cabbage gets. A couple of things we want to get ready is, number one, our jars. I tend to use the big wide mouth jars when I'm making cabbage, and the first thing you want to do is get your equipment really clean. This, I've just hand washed these in soap and water, but what I'll do is I'm now going to put them in the oven. Just while I'm cutting up the cabbage, I'll put them in the oven at about 220, just for a few minutes. That way, if there's any remaining bacteria anywhere on this jar, it's going to be dead from that heat. Not too hot that I'm going to bake the glass, but just hot enough that anything that's on here is going to die. Okay, they're ready to go. The second thing that I need to do now is get a weight of the cabbage, just so I can figure out how much salt I'm going to need to put in with the cabbage after I cut it up. Okay, so I'm zeroed out with that on there, and I'm going to use my salt. Now, the salt can be really important here. Don't use iodized salt. You want to look at the ingredients and you want to see salt. You don't want to see any kind of anti-caking agents or anything like that on the salt. You just want to see salt. Now the oven, I didn't set the timer on the oven with this, but usually what I do is I just wait. It's preheating right now. The stuff is in there. I'm waiting for that alarm to go off. And as soon as it does, in my head, I'm just going to give it another 3 to 5 minutes, and then I'll pull them out. Or actually, I won't pull them out. I'll just turn the oven on and leave them in. One of the things you want to do with this is I take the outside leaves off of each of them. They're a little tangled. They're really, when they grow, they're really tied in. And I take off some of the solid leaves of these, because what will happen at the end of these, you'll see when we get to the end of when we're packing these in the jar, I kind of make a lid out of these leaves to keep the smaller leaves in place. The whole idea of making cabbage, is to make sure your leaves all stay underneath the water, and this is a great way to ensure that happens. And our cutting board, put it over here, and I'm going to take this stem out and then slice him up and kind of shred him up and put him in the bowl. Now, the key is you're going to need a big bowl. You're going to need a really big bowl, because especially if, like, I don't have a mallet. I'm doing this with my hands, so as I'm in there churning that around, I need a big bowl to work with when I'm putting the cabbage in. So one of the things, I don't have massive bowls. I have pretty big ones, but not massive ones. But one of the things I found that most of us do have big crock pots. So one just like this, and what I'm going to do is, as I slice him up, I'm just going to put him in there, and then we'll cut him into fourths. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I have this in fourths, I'm just going to shave him down, and as I do, put him in here. And I layer a little salt in as I go. So what will happen is this salt will actually start working on this cabbage oil. So at this point, I'm going to turn my oven off, because they have been in there baking now for about 10 minutes. Now, I'm going to start to break this one down a while, just to show you what that's like. So again, some people will use a wooden mallet and they'll just beat on this. Some people will just, punch at it. The whole idea is you're looking to tear it up. You're looking to break the cells down. And again, I'm using about half the salt here. I'm going to use the salt on the other head, and then I'll mix those two together. But just for the sake of room, as this breaks down, and I have another one that I'll do the head there. I'm just going to get in here with my hands And I'm going to start breaking this down. And all I'm doing is just gripping this and just squeezing it and turning it, and sometimes wringing it. And that's all I'm doing. And I can already see they're already getting very wet. So a minute ago it was just really dry, but just that fast, this starts to get very wet. 3 to 5 minutes. And now I'll let it sit. We'll let this sit for about a half hour. I'll come back, give it another couple of turns, and then I'll pack it up. Not quite yet. There you go. See the water coming out of there? Which was just dry a second ago. And all I'm doing is just squeezing it up with my hands. So that's enough on that one. So that's one head of cabbage that just a minute ago was filling this, and now, you know, it's maybe a third. Okay, so we've reached a point where I now have both of my regular heads of cabbage, the regular green heads of cabbage. I did one in this container. It was like this. And we did this when you saw this, where it was full to the top, and now it's kind of down to here. It's already starting to not liquefy, but it's starting to pull all the liquid out of the sauerkraut, which is what we want. So what I'm going to do here, I tend to like spices in mine. So we're going to take some cayenne, and I'm going to sprinkle. So I sprinkle it on the one head, and this is where I'll combine them. And this is why we did we put all the weights together and got the total salt, because as long as we put all the salt, the right amount of salt with the total amount of cabbage, we're good to go. So I got this one spiced up. I'm gonna take this one out of here, and I'm gonna move it over to this container. We're gonna cayenne up again. And well, that worked out just right. That's all my cayenne powder. And this one I'm also gonna put just a smidge of smoked paprika, because we're also big paprika fans around here. So we'll get that mixed in. You can almost hear the water in there, like I'm almost in a puddle of water working there. And that's fine, that's what we want. So already we've combined these two, and you can see that we're already not at the top anymore. So what I'm going to do with this one, I'm just going to pat him down a little bit. And I'm going to set him off to the side while we do the purple head of cabbage. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that next step though, if you like the video, don't hesitate to give us a like. If you like the content we're putting out, consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment or question down below. I'm certainly not an expert in making sauerkraut. I'd love to hear from others out there, perhaps that have made it. I'd love to hear what others are making out there. Okay, so we've reached a point now where I'm going to start packing up the jars. So remember, we had our jars that are still in the oven. Let me get them out. Okay, so we're going to grab one of our wide mouth jars here, and all we're going to do is just start packing it up. And I did wash my hands, and that's always important through this process, is to make sure you're constantly washing your hands, because you're taking a food again that you're going to store for some time. So you're trying to get the least amount of contamination as possible into this food. Now what I'm going to do when I get this out here is I'm going to pack that down. This is one of the keys. This is why I have the wide mouth jars, is I can get my hand in there and really pack this in. So I'm just going to take my knuckles like this and go around the sides. You can probably see the liquid. The water is coming up over my fingers. It's that juicy. Okay, so again, the goal of this is to make sure that your fermentation is all taking place below the liquid line. So you can see little pieces of it sticking out, but this is where the big leaves come into play. care of him. And what I'm going to basically do with this leaf is make a lid. And I'm going to put this in here, up on top. And the idea of this lid is to contain all those little leaves and act as a cap. Is take a spring, and I'm going to take this spring and I'll put it right on top of there. And I'll take my cap. These caps have a little breather, like a little valve here, so as the gas builds, it's going to burp up through there. So this type of cap, there's no need to burp this. It can just stay. And that's it. This bottle's ready to go downstairs and sit for the next month. You'll notice everything is packed down very nicely here. You can see the cayenne in there, and my liquid is over the line. That spring and that big leaf, that's going to hold everything down below this liquid line. And as this ferments and starts to bubble up, it'll pop. It'll just breathe out that vent, but that vent will come right back down and not let air get in to create mold. Okay, so this is, at the end of it, this is the fruit of our labor here. So, we have these two they're completely our green cabbage, spring-loaded, hold-down device. We did the folded leaf, breather cap on top. Here we have a half and half. And you'll notice there's this little orange on here. Some of the liquid's a little orange. That's the cayenne pepper coming through. And on this one, a little mixture of both, just because we didn't get our sauerkraut all the way up. We need a little more space. Again, spring-loaded, breather cap. These two will go down and sit in the basement until called upon. And then this one, this is the way I started out doing it before I had fancy spring-loaded caps and relief valves. But this one simply has another tiny mason jar inside of it, pushing it down with a standard lid on top. Now this one I will keep upstairs because this one's going to take a little bit of management. Every couple of days I'm going to need to come through and burp it. The one thing you want to make sure, especially early on, the first 2 or 3 times you burp this, especially the first time, you want to maybe go into your sink and put it in your kitchen sink and do it there, because it's going to be very, very well could be, especially since this liquid is way up to the top here. When I crack this, it could be like a soda that you've shaken up and it's going to come fizzling out. So it's also not necessarily a bad idea to take a little plate and just set this on a plate. In case some of it starts leaking out, you'll know. But having it up here, I'll realize, hey, it's time to burp this because we smell it. So these are the ones that are ready to go. Now let's take a quick taste test of some sauerkraut that we've had sitting for a month now. So when you're done the process, this is what you end up with. So this is one my wife had done, and she did this about a month ago. We're gonna give it a taste test. Okay, so is it good or is it bad? 2 tests that you want to do to really make sure one way or the other. One, visual. You're going to take a look at it. Is the liquid clear? I find that if my liquid is good and clear and I'm not seeing anything crazy on there, I tend to be just fine. The other sense that you want to rely on is your smell. And if you crack the top of this and just give it a smell, it smells like sauerkraut. If it was bad, it wouldn't smell like sauerkraut. So I'll take the spring out of this, set these off. I usually take a big fork and take some of the surface leaves off of the top. Just get them out of there. Some of these big ones are what we use to just kind of weight down the little ones. Again, the whole idea is to keep everything under the water. See how this came out. Smells good. That's really good. That's really tender. And that's the thing that you're going to find. The longer you leave it sit, the more tender the cabbage is going to get. That's really a tender sauerkraut. And what will happen is once we crack this open, now I'm going to get a lid. I get just a regular lid, and you'll notice that already, since we've taken the spring out of here, the liquid is starting to come up into the cabbage. So in about a day, we basically won't even have this liquid there anymore until you get down to about this part of the jar. So at this juncture, I can cap this. This is a great way to make gifts for family, to be ready for the holidays coming up, especially here at least in the Pennsylvania region, where sauerkraut's a big deal at New Year's, and you're ready to go into the holidays. So that's all I have, and until next time, we'll see you on down the road. Peace. See you now.